Hello, good afternoon to you. I want to talk about eating disorders this hour. We've spoken in the past about how it is how they are affecting increasing numbers of boys and young men. But The Guardian has done some investigation into the numbers of people seeking help for eating disorders. And of course, those seeking help are those you can count. I'm sure there will be others who aren't seeking help. And the numbers of admissions to hospital, for example, of patients with potentially life-threatening eating disorders. So if you're going to hospital because of it, you're in trouble. And those numbers have almost doubled over the past 6 years. There are warnings from experts that NHS services to tackle anorexia and bulimia, for instance, are simply failing the people who are most in need. The numbers of admissions with a diagnosis of an eating disorder reached a peak of over 13,000. This is up to April last year, April 17. And that's up basically by about half, up from 7,000, just over 7,000 6 years earlier. So the direction of travel is the wrong direction of travel, is it not, with numbers like that? And the latest data shows that admissions are the highest they've been in at least a decade. There are theories around why this isn't working, why the treatments aren't always working. Some people have to travel a long, long way to get help because there's no help available where they live. Some people have moved house, according to this report in The Guardian, because they couldn't get the help that they needed locally. There are very few residential places for care for anorexia in particular, because that, perhaps more than bulimia, can seriously damage a person's health and heart health and otherwise as well. And various groups of people, from medical professionals to campaigners to MPs, are warning that this increase in admissions just simply points to one thing. It points to outpatient care being insufficient. So do we have to look again? You know, the previous hour we were talking about whether our approach to drugs and drug addiction is working. Do we need to look again at our approach to eating disorders and whether the way we're approaching them, the manner or the understanding that we have of them, I wonder whether that is even correct. We've only just moved on from the assumption that it's entirely to do with body image. That will, in many cases, in some cases, be wrapped up in it, and it will be in the mix. But it's a serious mental illness. If you speak to people who've experienced anorexia in particular, it is not just about wanting to look like the girls in the magazines. It's much deeper than that. It's about control. It can be linked to how somebody feels within their family setting. It's an incredibly complex set of disorders. And a consultant psychiatrist, a member of the Royal College of Psychiatrists, Frances Conan, has described the data that The Guardian found as really, really shocking. She says it's just quoting her now, she says it's deeply concerning that access to high-quality, comprehensive community services and outpatient services remains something of a postcode lottery. What was your experience of that postcode lottery? If you've lived with, come out the other side of an eating disorder of whatever nature, how did that happen? Where did you get the help? How long did you have to fight for that help? And I know there are a number of small residential places where young people can get, or anybody, but it's particularly young people, can get help for anorexia and other eating disorders. Did that kind of treatment work for you? What are you experiencing when it comes to outpatient services? Because this is a real shocker, really, the figures. It's a doubling, essentially, of the numbers of people being admitted to hospital with eating disorders. 0345 6060 973 is the number to call. We'd love to speak to you. 84850, the number to text. And you can tweet at LBC. Here to speak to me for a few minutes before that, though, is Hope Virgo. She suffered from anorexia in the past and now does prevention work in schools. Hope, good afternoon to you.
Hiya.
You have the right name for the topic of conversation.
Yes.
Tell me about your experience. So you developed anorexia really young, when you were 12.
Yeah, so, developed it when I was 12. I guess for me, it was a control thing, and it was something that I did, so the not eating and the over-exercising, to manage my emotions. And so I would stop feeling certain things. Around that time in my life, I had a lot of stuff going on. I was sexually abused and had quite a messy family life. And so this was my coping mechanism. Went on to hide my anorexia for about 4 or 5 years.
How do you hide it, though, if weight, particularly around that period of a girl's life when you start to actually fill out and look rounder, really, than, well, typically, it's not the same for everybody, but that you look rounder than you did as a little girl?
Yeah, so I wore really baggy clothing. I was already quite sporty, so I did a lot of running, was in all the sports teams at school, so I had to be quite small anyway. And I guess I just hid it really well. I managed to avoid meal times by causing family arguments, would go out quite a lot. I rebelled a lot through my teens as well, which I think probably helped, because as soon as anyone would start to talk to me about my weight or food, I would just get really angry with them and kind of storm out the room or just go out the house and go to friends' houses.
How did you get help? What came about? It was within 4 or 5 years you were eventually recovering?
Yeah, so my school actually got in touch with my mum, and then I went to my local GP, and then I went to the Child Adolescent Mental Health Services for about 6-7 months, but again continued to hide the fact that I was still losing weight. So I water loaded, which is when you drink loads of water so that your weight goes up, before every single week, where I used to go for a weigh-in. And then about 7 months later, they found out that I'd been lying for kind of all that time. I had an ECG done on my heart, and my heart was in a critical condition. So there was no choice but to admit me full-time to living in a mental health hospital, where I then spent the next year of my life recovering, learning how to eat again, learning how to talk, things like that.
Just before we come on to the work that you do now, tell me about that year. Was it a place that specialised in this, or was it just a place that was tackling your mental health issues?
So it wasn't a specialist eating disorder unit, no. There was people with psychosis in there, depression, OCD, probably about 5 or 6 of us who had anorexia. And I had a lot of therapy in there, so did a lot of work kind of one-to-one with a psychologist, a bit of cognitive behavioural therapy, quite a lot of group work as well. But I think the hard thing with anorexia particularly is that you can't start doing any of the emotional processing of things until your weight starts to go up, because you haven't got the energy to deal with it as well, which is the struggle, because then you start to put on the weight in hospital or wherever you are if you're an outpatient, and your physical kind of body is changing, but your mental side isn't keeping up.
And did that horrify you to start with?
Yeah, I hated it. I felt really fat all the time. I really struggled, and I think I really struggled because people were kind of watching me eat, and then I just thought everyone would think that everything was fine now and that I'd be 100% better. But it's so much more than just putting on the weight. Because
the eating is just the physical thing, the stopping eating and the starting eating. Yes, it's an indication of something, but it's not the whole story, is it? And it's interesting because I would include myself in this. You know, a lot of people who have no direct experience of it can't quite understand how something can go from, right, things are terrible around me, and you describe appalling things happening to you. So the only thing I can control is what I eat. So far, so good. I get that. But does it not occur to you when you start to become unwell that in a way you are doing the very thing that the person who was harming you or neglecting you would have achieved anyway, which is to harm you?
Yeah, I think so. But I think when you're in that mindset, so for me, when I missed meals and went for really long runs when I hadn't eaten for days, I got such a sense of achievement from it, and I got this self-worth and this value that I wasn't getting anywhere else.
So the logic I'm applying is pointless almost, because that's not the logic you're living in.
Yeah, everything logical goes out the window, and you get so sucked up into this anorexic voice in your head telling you if you don't eat then you're going to feel so much better. And obviously over time those kind of feelings of value that you got originally, they go, and you're more frustrated by the whole situation. So for me, towards the end, kind of just before I went into hospital, I didn't feel in control anymore. I was really unhappy. And I just wanted to stop caring about not eating and exercise, but I just couldn't get out of it. So I think it's so important that you stop people before they get to that point where they are so unhappy and have that kind of loss.
Yeah, well, your year in hospital would be one of these figures, wouldn't it, that we're talking about today, and admission to a hospital because of the severity of things. What do you see now, fast forward to the work you do now in schools? What do you see, and what kind of help do you see being out there for people?
I don't think there's a huge amount, if I'm honest. I think at the moment, there's a lot of promise of really good stuff happening in schools, the government investing in counsellors in schools and there being mental health education. But actually, it's not happening at a fast enough rate. And it does sound like they're just saying what they think should happen and no one's actually doing anything. I think it's been positive because people do talk about mental health, but with eating disorders particularly, and with anorexia as a key example, quite often people don't understand that it's not just about weight. And like, I'm of healthy weight now and I do really well actually, but there's been times in my recovery when I've sat down at a mealtime and not been able to eat the meal, but to everyone else around me, I look 100% okay, I'm completely healthy.
And you've not been able to eat the meal because of what? Because you need to wrest back a sense of control after a bad day or something like that?
Yeah, and and I think I don't know exactly what's in the meal and the calories have maybe scared me, or it's been kind of a food, maybe like cheese that I really struggle to eat. So things like that, and I think people then just look at a person and assume that because they're a healthy weight, they might not have those anorexic
all as
thoughts.
Well, yeah.
And then you kind of wait until that person then hits that crisis point before offering them any support.
What was the most important intervention for you?
Probably going into hospital, if I'm honest. I didn't have a choice at that point, and I think if I hadn't gone into hospital, I wouldn't have probably stayed. I wouldn't have survived.
So that teacher saved your life,
stopped.
Did they?
Yeah, pretty much. And I think for young people, just having someone kind of that reaches out to them, whether it's a teacher, whether it's kind of a family friend or someone in their family, that can offer that lifeline to say, I know you're not okay, you are really underweight, or I can see that you're struggling with food, what can I do? It then gives that child someone to talk to.
And what today's figures tell us is that early stage intervention that you didn't really get, did you, until things were very bad? You didn't really get the necessary intervention. That much earlier on we need interventions, which I suppose part of what you do is in schools, isn't it?
So I spend a lot of time going into schools talking to young people. I do a lot of work with the Sure Mind Foundation, who are leading on a piece of work at the moment looking at getting mental health education as a compulsory part of the curriculum. And actually it's things like that we need to see happening more, because it gives children the chance to talk about things, and it also makes people aware that they aren't alone in struggling, and also if they are struggling, that you can get to a point where you can manage your recovery. And I think for some people as well, with anorexia particularly, you get this, like I said earlier, this sense of value from it. So it's about educating those people who are struggling
and giving them another way of feeling valued.
The value they get. Yeah, like it's not going to last long if they have that anorexic voice and go with that instead.
Well, well done you on recovering and on the work that you're doing for other people as well, Hope. Thank you for talking to us today. Hope Virgo, who suffered from anorexia in the past. She does prevention work in schools, as you were hearing. She's written a book called Stand Tall, Little Girl, Facing Up to Anorexia, if you're interested in seeking that out. Your calls now, and I'll tell you what the Department of Health says it's doing about this. You know, there is hope. Speaking of hope, there is hope here. It's about how quickly the policies are being implemented and how useful they are to people, and your own experiences of that, how you were helped or a child of yours was helped. It'd be great to hear it. 0345 6060 973, the number to call. It's 17 minutes past 3.